Hey City Dweller, my name is Amanda and you're watching Clarified TV, the only place to be to learn to cook and eat sustainably in the city. Today we're chatting it up with one of my favorite people, Claire of Tomato Mountain Farm. Now Tomato Mountain is a certified organic, zero carbon footprint farm based in Brooklyn, Wisconsin. They share their food through home delivery subscriptions and farmers markets throughout the Chicagoland area. So let's dig into our topic for today. Now, I know I told you this question and we've been advertising it, Claire, but just so I can repeat it for everyone, we are talking about why is it essential to support local farmers during the climate crisis. So I'm going to say it one more time for the people in the back because I think this question is so important for people to answer. So why is it essential to support local farmers during our climate crisis? So I want to break this up into two questions because I know that's like a huge question to answer in just one go. So I want to first start talking about local. What do you think are the best ways to support local farmers? Do you have kind of like top three, top five ways that people can really take action and just start to support our local farmers?
Well, yeah, I think, the best way to support a farmer is definitely to be a part of their CSA. And not every farm does that. So, the second best way I would say is to buy their food from a farmer's market. Um, those are basically, if you can support a farmer directly, you're really, really helping a farmer. And if you're not supporting a farmer directly, like if you're buying through a grocery store, well, some of your support is going to go to somebody else. And For people that aren't familiar with it, a CSA, what that stands for is community supported agriculture. So, what that basically means is that you are committing to somebody's farm and they're going to commit to you in return. The reason that it's the best way to support a farmer is because farming is dependent upon planning. So for if we can plan and know how many people we're going to feed, we're basically going to not waste our resources. And that's so much of where every farmer's income is going in towards just like completely unpredictable markets or an unpredictable marketplace. And then the second best way to support a farmer is definitely to go to a farmer's market. Though I will say, a lot of the time we bring a lot of produce and a lot of people don't buy it. And we end up wasting that, or it goes back into our compost pile, which is nice. It's great to have healthy soil, but we would have healthy soil anyways.
Soil and healthy people.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I really think that's probably the best thing that you can do. There's just no such thing as cheap food, and I think that that's like, for me, that's sort of the pinnacle of this conversation. Cheap food is gonna you're gonna see that cost somewhere, whether it's like in your health or whether it's in the environment deteriorating around us, or even the health of a farmer. It's Yeah, and I think that's really important to remember. Like, I think we kind of forget that, we almost like we sort of expect to for all of our natural resources to be free. Like, we think that food and water and shelter, like these things are like a some sort of right, and we think that everybody else should pay for them, but in fact that's really all we need. So we should probably get the good stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because when I gave up the grocery store in 2016, I had kind of my top three things that really helped me to, I don't know, that were essential to me, because it was really weird to be like, I'm giving up the grocery store in January. This makes sense. And I don't think I intentionally did it that way, but by doing that, it was really just like diving right into realizing like how we have no clue. Like, I being able to detox the grocery store, which I don't think anyone's going to give up the grocery store like I did, and I don't suggest it per se because it was not the easiest thing to do. Even with a culinary degree, it's really frustrating. But you start to see the difference between always seeing an abundance of everything versus starting to see, like, right now, if you go to a farmer's market, obviously there's a lot that's there, there's an abundance that's there, and we're used to seeing that. But if you actually go to a farmer's market or even a farm in the wintertime, you don't actually get to see that. So I actually want to challenge people watching this Clarified TV episode to go to an indoor farmer's market this winter, because it will definitely change the scope of what's actually available. And if you think about, like, this is what's available here and this is what I have in my cupboard or pantry or whatever you want to call it, like, that's not going to really get you by the same way that you walking into Whole Foods and always seeing asparagus, and you don't really see the cost that comes with by having that. And also using tech, I really appreciate being able to follow our farmers on social media or even farmers markets, and really being able to have that transparency and being able to communicate with them on a different scale from way back when, where you had to actually just like travel horse and buggy all the way into town. Like, you actually have a easier access to your farmer, and then also you get to see what's in season without actually leaving your house, which is a huge benefit that we have, that people don't really realize that we have this right now. Like, even though there's big agriculture, but we also have these more modern day resources to support local farmers and to learn about it than we did before. Granted, we weren't disconnected before, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And then being able to support really being able to support things that are in season too is another one that I always talk to people about, where most people, they see the example I use is eating garlic and onions within their season, because everyone's always used to this winter garlic and winter onions, and it's like, no, like, this actually has a growing process, and it actually, I feel like from a chef's perspective, actually tastes better in that season too, because you have like spring garlic and onions are a lot lighter, and then you have peas and lettuces and things like that, where if you put it with dried garlic, it's like so I think being able to kind of use those bits as well can kind of help people to make it easier to try and transition, hopefully, or to at least switch it where you're using more local farm as your base produce, and then using like Whole Foods or larger companies as like the little things like the lemons that we don't have locally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I think like the more you do, the funny thing about like this climate that we live in, obviously you're not going to get peaches in the winter. But I mean, so much of what I love about what you do is like you teach so many people how to preserve and use all these ingredients for later in the year, which is really such a treat. And like, I am like by no means an expert, and I'm not perfect. I'm so far from that kind of sustainable living. But I don't really go to the grocery store except for a couple things here and there. And what I found in really focusing on eating seasonally is that you actually don't want asparagus by the end of the season. Like, you've had it, right? Like, you've had so much of it because you ate it when it was here, that when it comes time for like a new crop, you're kind of like, I don't really want this anymore. It's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I had blueberries all summer until blueberries were done, and I don't want them anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, that was plenty of blueberries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you get into the winter, it's like you don't really crave like a really fresh salad. What you kind of want are like root vegetables. It's interesting, like our bodies are used to eating seasonally. Our whole ecosystem, like our physical ecosystem, is like craving that we like eat vegetables this way. And also because they're more nutrient dense. The longer something sits, the longer it's gonna, like, the more it's gonna deteriorate. As it deteriorates, all of that vital energy is basically like slowly leaking out of your produce. And your body wants stuff that's like super, super fresh. So, I mean, I think I think there's nothing but benefits to it, to eating seasonally. Like, I've, started working with Tomato Mountain just in February, and I've never been in better health. And so much of that is that I just eat really clean seasonal food. And I think a lot of it too is I feel better about it, right? Like, I feel better about my habits every day. And I think that is a big part of your health, is like really feeling like you're making a positive impact both for yourself and the world. It's just like, I don't feel guilty when I eat my food. And that should be how we feel, right? But like, I definitely feel guilty if I like order something on Amazon, right? Like there's
It's like this looming presence, like
terrible.
you could have did something different. But I mean, it's one of those things where some people don't think about it because it's kind of like the first search result, right? It's like, well, when something's broken, you Google it, and if Amazon pops up, this is a reliable source. So it's kind of unlearning these habits that we're used to and kind of the resources that we're used to. And I think it can be kind of, it makes people nervous sometimes because you do see a ton of people at farmers markets, but their biggest, I think people's biggest worries, and definitely comment below if you guys have your worries on what it is about not purchasing a lot. But I think sometimes either people, they're not sure what's going to be there and they don't know how to shop within that season of it. You're not determining what you're going to get. It's the season and the soil that's around you that's going to tell you that. Like, I go out into my garden right now. I have so many squash. I'm just like I'm over it. And I'm like, I want to go out to eat. And I know like later in the wintertime, I'm going to be so happy. And then the whole cycle happens all over again. But I go out there and like that determines what most of my groceries are going to be. And then everything else supports that instead of going to an actual big store where, you have avocados on the list, pineapple, this, and you can find all these things. So I think that's a big part is that people they have to unlearn these habits really and be able to go into a farmer's market and say, okay, like how, like I can make this vegetable dish and use kind of any of these things. If this isn't there, it's okay. And really just get people to be comfortable that it's okay. It's just food. Like it's not, you don't need all of these puzzle pieces to make some fancy, crazy dish. It's just simply cooking, just like understanding the basics. So I think that's a really big change or pivot for people is really, changing that aspect mentally before just go and shop here versus here. It's not always that simple when you're used to like driving a certain way or you have certain habits that are circled around that.
Right. No, absolutely. And so much of it is just like trying. You just got to try. It's like you're going to make a couple things that probably aren't that great at first. And then you just like have to like keep.
Oh, this seems okay.
I mean?
Especially when you get into the depths of the internet and you're like, all right, squash preserving. And then like you find these other like keywords that are just not popular. And like most people don't see this. I don't post these recipes because they're not delicious. But you go on there and you're just like, okay, yeah, this could work, and you try it out and you're like, wow, all right, no. But it's the trial and error, and it's not always fun. But people, they don't want to have that unknown or that wastefulness mentality, even though we technically already have this unknown and wastefulness mentality on the transparency end of the large agriculture. So I think it's kind of interesting from both ends.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but like so much of it is it really does come down to like being able to adjust your habits to, in a way, the grocery store isn't really convenient, right? It's the same concept as like, there's no such thing as cheap food. It's like, this is all coming at a cost to something else. So like, maybe it's a little bit inconvenient at first to kind of cook what you just kind of have in the fridge or what you randomly bought at the farmer's market, or to kind of figure something out about that. But after a while, once it becomes your habit, it's actually way more convenient to do that than to be like on your phone figuring out what you're going to eat through like your 5 food apps, or like, are you going to order something on Amazon Prime and then it's like 4 hours later and you're like still hungry and you haven't figured it out. But if you just like had developed this habit of like how to eat clean in an easy way, like you can do it. It's just like anything else. It's like exercising, and I think so much of it too, like someone will join our CSA and then they'll be like, oh, we're just not sure like what to do with all of this stuff. And it's like, well, the thing is like, if you go to the bike store and you buy a bike because you want to get healthy and you want to ride your bike around, it's your job then to ride the bike, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not the farmer's job at the end of the day to like teach you how to eat well. Like a CSA is like anything supporting farmers. Like it's like anything else. Like, you have to actually do the work. You can't just like buy a gym membership and like expect to get fit. You know what I mean? Like you have to go to the gym membership. And like that kind of active participation, I think ultimately it's like a mentality issue overall. And I think that we could really fix a lot of problems in our society as far as our wastefulness around like how we think about what's convenient and what's not convenient. And convenience, it might feel convenient now, but like 5 years from now when you have colon cancer, that might be less convenient, right? There's like, or, you know, if the world continues to implode, that's not going to be very convenient. So it's like we have to like figure this out.
We have to pick, and normally anything that's actually worth the work is worth it in the end. But so you started talking about climate, so let's kind of turn our attention to the other half of the question on the climate crisis. What impact? What do you say? What impact one person is making when they support agriculture methods that are grown on a larger scale and predominantly not local? So, you know, people go into a store all the time and there's words and labels shouting at them. And in that moment, you don't really connect with what things are happening behind that, but really just bringing to light the differences between the two.
Well, I think a lot of it is it has to do with the travel. So if you're most things that are being imported basically or brought into the grocery store have traveled for thousands of miles. And what you're doing then, it's kind of like getting on a plane. Like your emissions are absurd when, you know, this truck, this huge freight has gone all the way from Mexico all the way up to Chicago or wherever you are. That's a lot of miles. It's also not good for the land to have like massive agricultural projects. So if you're in the same way, like, you know, think permaculture, like you want there to be a diversity of the soil and you don't want to just have acres and acres and acres and acres of tomatillos because what you're doing is really like, there's no way that any like human could just manage that in an organic way. What you're going to end up doing is spraying that field to make sure that you're getting your tomatillos at the end of the day. And that spray is going to run off into the rivers and into all your water supply. So, and it's also going to ravage the land. So if you're not taking care of it, it's just like it's the same, you know, paradigm as any big corporation. It's like this mass production stuff is expensive for the climate as a whole. I think like a really good example of that is, you know, is actually here in the Midwest is the Corn Belt. Like we're planting millions of acres of corn. This isn't like the really nice sweet corn that you get at the grocery store, right? This is like, you know, corn that's used for animal feed, that's used for corn syrup, that's used for basically a bunch of things that it shouldn't be used for in the first place. We're planting so much corn that we have to obviously irrigate it ourselves. And irrigating millions of acres of corn is literally we're putting more moisture and more water into the atmosphere. We're literally increasing the humidity index because of all the corn that we plant. Well, that has a devastating effect on pretty much any permaculture or mono-aware farm, right? We're underwater because all of that water is getting trapped in the air and it's not just going to fall right back on the corn that we irrigated. That's impossible, right? So all of that I think is just really costly. A small farm is, you know, you're going to get better quality produce. Just like any small batch thing, someone's going to have cared for it in a much different way. And also it's just not traveling that far to get here. That is huge, right? Like you're literally just decreasing your emissions in this really insane way. But ultimately a lot of it is around like how someone is being a steward to the land. And if someone's being a good steward of the land, you know, that's better for the environment 9 times out of 10. Though I will say, we talk about this a lot. Chris Cavalli, the farmer I work with at Tomato Mountain, who's been doing this for 27 years, he's really an incredible farmer. we talk about it a lot that, technically farming isn't even really that sustainable. I mean, we're manipulating the land all of the time. Um, and that's not ideal. Like what ideally, we're just foraging, because then we're not disrupting an ecosystem that already exists.
Yeah.
But we don't really have that option as a society anymore. So because because we don't have that option, it's like, well, we should just support farmers that are careful about how they work with their land.
Mhm.
And that's also going to make a healthier plant, which is going to make you a better farmer, which is going to create less waste, which is going to provide a possibility of creating a profit, which is almost impossible these days. It's very difficult um, to really even break even as a farmer these days. And I think so much of that is because it's really convenient to order from Amazon Prime. Like,
And I mean, it's I feel like it's hard too because you see the low prices for produce, and when people go to the market, they're like, why am I spending $6, $7, $8 for this small amount of food? But they don't realize that there's a cost of like living for someone that actually is out there in the sun picking that, or like there's so many corners that have been cut, and so many people that are kind of stepped on or over, that by the time you get to that 99, 69 cent whatever, like it seems great for you. Also, there's no nutrients in it, so it's kind of bogus because now you you need like a bushel of vegetables to get the vitamins. But it's kind of crazy though if you think about like how people are choosing organic. There's going to be better vitamin content and better nutrients in there because it's taken care of. Why not pay for that at a market where you're getting not only something that is a better farming practice, but also you're actually getting people that are paid better wages? And I think being able to get people to understand that, and also understand they don't need as much food as you never need as much food as you think you do, which is always
yeah.
insane. Like since I have given up the grocery store and I've kind of been able to walk through and really watch other people, and we go and get our gas from Costco. And so sometimes we'll go in there, and it's stressful to see people. Like it looks like the apocalypse is happening, and I'm like, there's it's like family of 2 or 4, and they have stuff in the double giant containers, or containers, the carts. And I go to the market once a week with my little bag, and I'm like, okay, like there's 3 potatoes in here, we'll be just fine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how we think that we need like pounds of this, and you just can't go and be okay with having a smaller amount of something, and realizing how you can really just stretch that. So like I can go to a market and buy something that's really organic at the right price that hopefully gives people the right way to live and to protect the soil. But it takes me a week or 2 to actually like use it up for 2 people, or even if we're entertaining. Like there's always an abundance of food here, even though people go into my cupboards and they're like, this is it, like this is all. I'm like, yeah, like there's onions hanging here, but I'm waiting for waiting for hell to freeze over before I use them. So it's just really, it's really a weird adjustment, but I really think it's a big part of us just being able to see the difference. Like when you start to realize like the whole process, which is why I created Clarified TV, because being in a city, it's not as easy to see that process, or to get access, or to have those conversations very quickly. But it's just so much simpler just to not have to worry about all those things. When it's the same thing with consumerism. It's like a food consumerism, right? And you just start to cut down, you start to purchase better, and everything just kind of falls into place, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I really do think like so much of this, like I'm overwhelmed by data, right? Like I'm completely overwhelmed by all of the data around the changing climate and just like my phone, and like it's like there's so much information out there, and there's so much information about like what to eat and why you should eat it, and there's so many different schools of thought out there, and it can be really overwhelming. I'm generally really overwhelmed by
Yeah.
it. But and like as I said, like I don't have exemplary habits. Like I try my best. I bring the thermos with me when I remember, and it's not dirty, and there's like certain things that I can do. But what I've learned in being so overwhelmed by all these options and all this data is it's just like there are just certain things that I can do that are really easy. And I don't have to understand the ins and outs of them. I don't have to, I really don't have to know like is what's better for me, broccoli or kale. Like what all I need to do is just eat good, clean food. Like I don't even really need it to taste that great, right? Like I mean, it's nice when it does, but I don't need it to. What I need personally, what I would like is to be able to eat food from farmers for the rest of my life. So if I want to do that, then I'm going to support the farmer now because I want there to be farmers. And if I don't support the farmers, how can I expect that my neighbor is going to support the farmer?
And then it's harder to bring that knowledge back if no one supports it too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, well, here's this one thing I can do that makes sense to me, right? Like, I don't have to know all of the science behind all of this. All I have to know is like, this is good for the world. This is good for me. And, I have to feel good about it. And I think that that's like as simple as it is. It's like we need to start taking responsibility as citizens for, the world around us. We need to vote with our pocketbook. We literally need to vote with our wallets. And that's really what our system looks like at this point. So if the whole thing's run by corporations, like we need to start supporting real people that like aren't in the pocket of somebody else. And I just like getting back to the basics. Like it shouldn't take a scientist to tell you that like vegetables are good for you, right? Like this is like it really shouldn't. Like it's just common
with your
sense.
own soil. Yeah. And it's been an interesting, like even just for me in my journey with gardening, because everyone's like, "You're such a great gardener," and I'm like, I'm a lazy gardener, and two, it's just like this. It's just an extension of my home. But it's like if you have soil, I feel like it's your obligation to like be somewhat responsible for the food that you need to survive. Like we put so much like of our survival into a system's hand where like literally like that could just end and then we're stuck where I wouldn't survive forever, but I'd have some kind of resources and you have people you can reach out to. But it's all of the essential things that we're all searching for that just makes everything kind of come together, with community, with repairing our soil, with investing in our own communities as of like businesses and things like that. Like all of these things start to fall in line when you eat local, when you actually take care of the home space that you have, if it's an apartment or if it's a house, when you're friends with your neighbors. Like I have neighbors that actually have apple trees and things like that, and I just reach out with them just to discuss with them. But you start to have this community, and it's these little steps. It's just kind of like a domino effect. Versus with big agriculture, you end up having this like it's just me and my avocado, and you don't understand like all of these other things that's happening because of that. And you end up having this kind of closed off screen in your phone mentality, and you don't see the community that's around you and how like us coming together solves that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really hard to be grateful for things that you have you have no idea what it took, right? Like I think like when you get to talk to your farmer and like when you have that privilege, it's like you start to understand like there's so many thousands of like hours that are going into you eating that cucumber, right? It really, it's true. And it's like, once like God, how hard people worked to just like keep the farm going, it's like, oh, wow. You enjoy your meal differently. I think it's really a grounding experience. I think that's a really good way to say it. It's like you're either disassociated completely with the whole thing, or you like have an opportunity to be grateful, which is like that's awesome, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, even and not even like in a like weird spiritualistic kind of like didactic way, just like it feels good. I want to feel good, right? And like this is what's going to help me feel good. Like if you don't care about the climate, like that's fine. Like maybe you could care about like feeling good, right? Like there's
there's always an entry point of like nothing else matters but this, then you still like you're still doing good by other things. But yeah, it's true. I mean, and even just going to a farmer's market feels better. Even if there's a ton of people there, there's still a ton of people going to like a Jewel-Osco, and it's a stressful environment. There's so many things that are begging for your attention. Where if you go to a market, it's just fresh air and food and baby strollers, and it's a lot less stressful than than the other counterparts. So there's like there's no negative side. I mean, maybe people will say the rain, but again, it's like you said, it's a grounding experience. I'm like, I'll go out there in the rain and there's less people, so I'm like, I have an easier way to go around this. So yeah, I think it's great though. One of the homework assignments I'm giving people, I'm giving out homework now on Clarified TV.
That's awesome.
If you have Netflix, or if you have a friend that has Netflix, I know people trade Netflix like candy. I have no idea, but there's a show on there called Rotten. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think there's like 6 or 7 episodes. I was absolutely in love with it when I saw it, and one of the ones in particular that makes me think about it in this conversation was the garlic episode, which really talks about like not only just the small farmer and how it's impacted or how they're impacted, but also the how the farm ends up sending everything to China, and how prisoners are the ones peeling the garlic, and you start to see that, and it's not really like in a documentary way that's trying to like scare you, but it's just very matter of fact. And they talk about honey, and I think cod is on there. There's a couple other different ones, but it's really great. Like I wish I could be able to share that on Clarified TV, but since Netflix has it, go and watch it on there. And then I want to dive into Tomato Mountain as well. So I know you talked about the CSAs, and we're going to be posting the article about CSAs, and I was able to try Tomato Mountain Farm CSA for a little while, so I'll be talking about that and the experience. But can you break down a little bit of what you do at Tomato Mountain and how you help bridge the lack of access to local and sustainable food to our city dwellers in Chicago?
Yeah, well, I hope I'm helping to bridge it. I mean, we're doing our best. But and that's absolutely our intention. But basically, what we do is we offer a subscription box to the farm, and you get a box delivered to your door every week. It's super affordable. It's like we start at $24 a week, which is basically what you'd buy in produce. Our produce is pretty inexpensive. It's pretty comparable to what you'd buy at the grocery store at the end of the day. And I know that because not only am I in charge of all the purchasing, because we also work with other farms. It's not just produce from our farm, which is super cool. It allows for a lot of variety. It allows us to support our neighbors, which I think is really important. But you know, it's also just like we're kind of like a part of the ecosystem. And I mean, I go to the grocery stores and I look and I see, they're charging you $6 a pound for peppers, and we're still charging you guys $5 a pound. Like sometimes like it's interesting. It's pretty, yeah, it's pretty affordable. And then in working with other farms, we also have a program where you can add to your box every week. So it's not just like strictly produce and perishable goods, but also like, salami from a meat company we love, and cheese from J2K. And yeah, and so that's super fun too, that we can support local artisans in our community. And also it's like, then you really don't need to go to the grocery store very often. So much of that is available to you. And yeah, we've been doing that for about 10 years now. And it's quite a task, to be honest. Like we used to wholesale, and we decided, about 5 years ago to switch or to stop wholesaling as much as we possibly can. We still do a little bit so that we could focus on the CSA. I think it's one of the easiest ways to eat healthy and stay eating healthy, because you don't really have to think twice about it. Someone just sends you what's the most local, most seasonal stuff that we can find. And then also what we're sending you is produce that's going to last for weeks. It's going to last for weeks because we picked it yesterday, or our friends picked it yesterday, or the day before that. And you're really getting it so soon after the harvest. And we are so careful about how we handle it. I don't know if you've ever seen like a truck basically unloading into a grocery store, but they're throwing that stuff around like they're softballs. we are super careful. It's like our personal yoga, you know. We like bring tomatoes in crates with foam at the bottom in single lines. Like, we're nuts. And that's because we think that if we're going to put all this time and effort into making this really awesome produce, that we want it to come to your house and be like super nice still. Like, we don't want it to be bruised, and we don't, you know, we want to make sure that it was kept at the proper temperature for as long as it needed to be at that temperature. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple.
So, yeah, I had a great time actually having the CSA, so I can't wait for that article to come out and hopefully encourage more people. I will link the website so that people can check out the CSA below. It's not here as we're recording, obviously, so this is the invisible box, but you get the gist. But thank you so much. I love always talking to you and having conversations about all things food and farms. So I know we'll have more conversations.
Yeah, you're the best, Amanda. You're the
and
best.
I want to City Dweller VIPs as well. They're the ones that help fund the show. If you want to be a part of doing your part to give this free access to transparency to your food, you can always sign up. I'm going to also link that one in my invisible box below. And what I want City Dwellers to do is to put in the comments below, name one item in your kitchen that you are going to start sourcing locally this weekend. Not next weekend, not next month, but this weekend. And it could be at a farmer's market, it could be at a store, but just find one item that you're going to start sourcing locally. Let us know in the comments below. And remember, you can always go out on the town without leaving a trail. I'll see you guys soon.